In the far reaches of the Imperium beyond the light of the Astronomicon, there lies a silence that is heavier than the void itself. It is a silence written into the records of the Administratum as a lost holding, a silence that the Ordo Hereticus classifies as quarantined by decree. A silence marked on imperial star charts not with a name but with a single stark word, excommunicatus. But once, before that word was written, before that silence fell, there was a fortress. It was called Citadel Invictus. Forged in the name of Rogel Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, it was a bastion world raised in the wake of the Horus Heresy. When half the galaxy burned in betrayal, when loyalist blood stained the walls of Terra itself, the High Lords decreed that never again would humanity be left so vulnerable. To stand as eternal watchtowers, fortress worlds were built across the stars. And among them, Citadel Invictus was a jewel, a stronghold bristling with void-shielded battlements, orbital guns that could shatter fleets, and cathedrals carved from living rock to honor the god Emperor's triumph. For centuries, it stood unbroken. Armies of orcs dashed themselves against its walls and were ground into dust. Drukhari raiders tried to pierce its void nets and were burned to ash in the upper atmosphere. Even whispers of chaos cults found no seed to root, for the Citadel was manned by Dorn's own blood. The Invictors, a chapter born of the Imperial Fist John line, sworn to stand eternal upon that fortress world. And for centuries they did, but now Invictus is silent. A signal fades the last official records speak of an assault, a Xenos warlord gathering tribes of greenskins from a dozen systems, a crusade of orcs so vast that even a fortress world might tremble. The Imperial Navy rallied, the Astra Militarum gathered, and the Invictors raised their banners. The void burned with battle, the orc fleets were shattered, and then silence. No return signal, no Imperial fleet emerging victorious, no Vox Echo, only silence. Administratum Adept struck the system from the rolls. The Navy declared the fortress lost with all hands. The Inquisition debated whether the world had fallen to Xenos, or whether some darker hand had claimed it. But in the end, no sanction was given to investigate. For centuries, the fortress lay shrouded. Its name was spoken only in whispers, often ending in silence when an inquisitorial sigil was invoked. To the galaxy at large, Invictus was forgotten. The hidden watchers, and yet not all forgot. Within the archives of the Black Templars, those ever-crusading sons of Dorn, mention of the Citadel persisted. In hushed councils aboard battle barges, chaplains reminded their brothers that Dorn's blood had not faltered. That silence did not mean death. That oath sworn to eternal vigilance did not break so easily. For Dorn had built his sons to endure the long war, and some among the Black Templars whispered, "Perhaps Invictus endures still." It was a dangerous hope. Dangerous because the Inquisition forbade such speculation. Dangerous because hope in the Imperium often leads to heresy. But still the thought lingered like an ember refusing to die. Rumors in the warp, then came the dreams. Astropaths began to mutter in their sleep. Voices faint, broken, carried on static, spoke of walls unbroken, of banners still raised. Some heard prayers in the dream echoes. Dorn's name spoken like a litany, a promise of eternal defiance. Others heard only screams. The Ordo Hereticus silenced the rumors. Scrolls were sealed. Scribes vanished. Yet the more the Inquisition tried to choke the whispers, the more they spread. Among rogue traders charting forbidden stars, among missionaries who claimed to hear cries for deliverance during their sermons, and most of all, among the Black Templars. They listened. They remembered. A fortress of ghosts, what truly happened within the Citadel is unknown to the Imperium at large. No Imperial fleet returned to tell the tale. No astropath dared look too closely into that darkness, lest their minds be torn apart. But the legends that survived, carried by smugglers, carved into the planks of dead ships found drifting at the edges of that void, spoke of strange sights, a world where the sky itself burned with fire that never went out, cathedrals where statues of Dorn wept blood. and a fortress where space marines fought endlessly, their armor cracked and blackened, yet never truly dying. A fortress not dead, but trapped. Not fallen, but unredeemed. The weight of silence in the grim darkness of the far future, silence is never empty. It is always filled with fear, with suspicion, with the weight of things best left unsaid. So it was with Citadel Invictus. For the Ordo Malleus, its silence smelled of demonic corruption. For the Ordo Xenos, it suggested an alien victory too shameful to record. For the Ordo Hereticus, it was evidence of some inner rot, a chapter perhaps straying from the Emperor's light, their faith curdling into something darker. Each feared something different. Each silenced those who asked too much, but none acted. None dared to pierce the silence, for silence is safe. And in the Imperium, truth is often more deadly than lies. The Ember of Memory is a stubborn thing. Among the Black Templars, Chaplain Borachio kept a fragment of Invictus' last transmission etched into his rosarius. He carried it across 100 crusades, whispering its words in his battle sermons. By Dorn's oath, Invictus endures. Among the Astra Militarum, some veterans told campfire tales of the fortress, swearing they had once fought alongside its warriors. Warriors who did not die easily, who stood like stone, even when outnumbered 10-1. And among the Ordo Hereticus themselves, there were those who argued, carefully, cautiously, that perhaps Invictus had not fallen, but stood still, cut off from aid, waiting for deliverance. Whispers. Always whispers. But in the 41st millennium, whispers can shape crusades. The calm before the storm, so the galaxy moved on. Wars burned elsewhere. Hive fleets devoured worlds, orc empires rose and fell, chaos spilled endlessly from the eye. And Citadel Invictus drifted in silence. Yet the silence was not empty. Beneath it, something stirred, a fortress, a chapter. A secret waiting began not with a scream nor with a battle, but with a whisper. Deep within the astropathic relay stations orbiting Hydrax 4, a voice broke through the static. It was faint, like the memory of a dream, carrying on waves of distortion. Most such transmissions are ignored, echoes of the Imperium, fragments of 1,000 worlds bleeding into one another. But this one was different. The relay adept listening was an old man named Severin. His duty was simple. Sit at his console, monitor the endless noise of the void, and report only what matched Imperial cipher codes. For decades, he had listened to little but static. But on that night, Severin sat bolt upright. Through the distortion came words, fractured, distorted, but unmistakably Imperial Gothic. Dorn's oath, Invictus endures. His withered fingers trembled across the rune keys. He increased gain, filtered frequencies, bled out background distortion. The voice grew clearer, though broken by static and time. We are besieged, we are betrayed. The Emperor protects. Severin's heart pounded. He knew that name, Invictus. The fortress whispered of only in forbidden archives, a name struck from most records. He should have silenced the channel. He should have pretended it never happened. Instead, he pressed record. The message spreads by dawn cycle. The recording had passed through 3 administratum clerks. Each stamped it with red sigils of unverified transmission, each adding their own cautionary notes. Yet none dared destroy it outright. By dusk cycle, it was in the hands of inquisitorial agents. The Ordo Hereticus interrogated Severin until his mind snapped, burning him alive for listening too intently to warp voices. The relay station's archives were purged, its staff quietly reassigned. The official record declared the signal nothing but noise. But it was too late. Copies had already spread, scribbled on parchment, etched into data slate fragments, whispered from mouth to mouth, a message carried not by sanctioned orders, but by rumor, by faith, by desperation. By Dorn's oath, Invictus endures. The Council of Fire far away, aboard the battle barge Sword of Wrath, Marshal Adriston of the Black Templars knelt before the relic of Sigismund. His armor bore scars from a dozen crusades, his features weathered by centuries of war, his eyes hard as adamantine. He was a warrior who had never bent, never yielded, never doubted. And yet, when the chaplain Barachil brought him the fragment of transmission, Adrastin's heart stirred. The two stood alone in the relic chapel, lit only by the flickering light of votive candles. Barachil's voice was a growl of conviction as he recited the words, "By Dorn's oath, Invictus endures." Adrastin said nothing at first. He simply closed his eyes, and in the silence he remembered. He remembered the tales of Invictus spoken in hushed tones among the chaplains of the Eternal Crusade. He remembered the oath sworn that no son of Dorn would ever abandon his watch. And he remembered the silence, a silence that had lasted too long. When he finally spoke, his words were iron. "Ayen, we shall break the silence." The forbidden debate, but not all agreed. The Black Templars' senior sword brethren gathered in the stratagem, their voices sharp as blades. Some argued that the transmission was a trap, a lure cast by heretics or Xenos to draw loyalists into a slaughter. Others whispered that it might be worse, that the Invictors had fallen and now sought to spread their corruption. But Adrastin's voice silenced them all. "Would you doubt Dorn's blood?" His words rang like thunder across the chamber. "Would you abandon those who swore the same oaths we hold sacred? If Invictus endures, they endure alone. Forgotten, betrayed, shall we now be counted among those who abandon them?" Barachil struck his Crozius against the deck. "The Emperor tests us. Only through fire is faith proven." And so the decision was made, not by permission of Terra. Not by decree of the High Lords, but by oath. The Inquisitor's warning word reached the Inquisition swiftly. When an Inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus, Lady Vera, confronted Adrastin, her fury was cold as ice. "You would doom a crusade for a ghost," she hissed, her rosette gleaming in the stratagem light. "Do you not understand what you risk?" Citadel Invictus was sealed by decree. Whatever stirs there is corruption. To seek it is to defy the throne itself. Adrastin stood unmoving. His hide armored bulk dwarfed her, but his words were calm, unyielding. "You mistake me, Inquisitor. I do not seek permission. I seek only oaths fulfilled." Her eyes narrowed. "And if what you find is heresy, then we shall burn it. And if it is your own blood, Adrastin's silence was answer enough. Dreams of ash as preparations began. The fleet stirred with unease. Astropaths aboard the Sword of Wrath bled from the eyes when they dared probe the coordinates whispered in the transmission. Some went mad, clawing at their own throats, whispering of a chains of fire and the A fortress that bleeds. Even among the warriors, dreams spread. Neophytes awoke screaming Dorn's name. Sword brethren reported visions of walls crumbling, of brothers locked in endless combat, of a relic burning with impossible light. The chaplains declared these visions to be omens, proof that their path was true, but even they could not silence the unease in their voices. The march to silence, and so the crusade was declared. 3 strike cruisers and the battle barge Sword of Wrath. 5 full companies of Black Templars, bolters consecrated, chainswords oiled with sacred engines, banners raised in Dorn's name. Scores of tech marines, servitors, and serfs, sworn to eternal loyalty. They gathered in the void, their ships wreathed in incense smoke, their litanies echoing through the halls. Adrastin himself led the oath ritual, his voice carrying through every vox, every deck, every chamber. Brothers, sons of Dorn, the Emperor tests us, and we shall not falter. By his light we shall find our kin. By his fire we shall burn the heretic. By his will we shall break the silence. The deck thundered with a single cry, and no pity, no remorse, no fear. And with that the fleet turned its prows toward the forbidden stars. The last warning, but not all were silent. From Terra came a single transmission sealed in sigils of the Inquisition. It carried no threat, no command, only a warning, a turn back. The citadel is not yours to claim. Leave it buried, leave it forgotten. The message repeated 3 times, then ended. Adrastin listened and then ordered it purged. "Invictus endures," he said, and the crusade sailed on. The citadel had not always been silent. Once the bastion of Invictus rang with the crash of drill blades on steel, the hymns of warriors chanting in unison, and the thunder of bolters and ceremonial firing lines. Now only echoes lingered, shadows carved into stone by memory. A lone figure drifted through the ruins, a servitor ancient and broken. It shuffled along a corridor whose walls bore murals of Rogaldorn, their paint peeling, their glory faded. Its voximeter crackled with corrupted catechisms, half prayers, half mechanical whines. No master remained to correct it. No brother stood to silence it. The servitor passed beneath a shattered aquila carved in gold leaf and marble. One wing was missing, as though the emperor's symbol had been deliberately defaced. The other wing drooped like the arm of a corpse. The throne of dust at the heart of the fortress lay the chapel of eternal vigil, once a sanctum of devotion. Its doors, adamantium reinforced, embossed with the sigil of Dorn, were cracked down the center as if a colossal force had struck them. Inside, the grand altar was overturned, its stone cracked by violence. Above it hung the throne of dust, an ancient reliquary where relics of the chapter had been displayed. Shards of Dorn's fortifications, sanctified chains from the siege of Terra, even fragments of enemy weapons defeated in righteous battle. But now the reliquaries stood empty. Only ash remained where relics had been placed. Ash and a single blood-stained gauntlet fused to the stone. The gauntlet was not human-sized. It was the hand of an Astartes. Whispers of the past, if one had stood in that chapel, if one had dared to listen, they might have sworn that faint voices still lingered, caught in the stone. Not ghosts. The Emperor does not permit such weakness. But memories, echoes, imprinted upon the walls by centuries of fervor and betrayal. They spoke not in clear words, but in half-heard cries. Hold the line. E for Dorn, for the Emperor. No, brother, not this path. The shield is his gift. The clash of chainswords, the hiss of last fire, the scream of a dying brother. This was not the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a graveyard, one where the corpses had not all lain still. A chronicle of ruin hidden deep within the fortress was a vault of records. The Scriptorum Invictus. Here, servitors and scribes had once etched every deed of the chapter into data, slate, and parchment. No ordinary imperial historian would ever be granted entry, for the words within were sacred, chronicles of purity, of victories, of unwavering devotion to the Imperium. But when the bastion fell silent, so too did the scribes. The vault remained, its doors sealed, but cracks in the adamantium allowed the faint glow of failing lumen lamps to escape. Within, shattered shells lay in ruin. Parchments were scattered like fallen leaves. Data slates flickered with corrupted code, their binary canticles twisted into screams. Upon one cracked wall, words had been scrawled in blood. The faith of Dorn demands more than the Emperor's silence. The hand that wrote it had pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the stone. The great rift's touch, though the galaxy beyond roiled in war, the citadel seemed cut off from all else. Yet the cicatrix maledictum, the great rift that tore the Imperium asunder, had left its mark here. The skies above Invictus burned faintly red, the stars swallowed by shadows. The bastion's once proud towers now leaned toward the abyss, as if the fortress itself bowed in supplication to a power it should never have recognized. And still, the Vox towers broadcast. Their signals were faint, broken, distorted by the warp. But across dead systems, across half-forgotten void routes, the whispers carried Emperor Dorn, chains, shield. The message repeated endlessly, cycling for centuries, waiting for someone to hear it. The distant watchers not all was barren on Invictus, whereas in its depths, in the lightless catacombs beneath the fortress, eyes still watched. Shapes moved, not fully human nor fully machine. Fragments of the chapter's servitor legions still lingered, broken, rewired, whispering code into the dark. Some bore weapons fused into their frames. Others dragged chains behind them as though bound in eternal penance. And deeper still, beyond even the servitors, a chamber glowed with faint amber light. Its walls were lined with stasis caskets, each cracked and frostbitten. Within lay the remnants of warriors, some at peace, some twisted in agony. One casket remained intact, its occupant still preserved. The warrior's armor bore the sigil of the Invictors, a black shield upon a golden field. His eyes were closed. His lips whispered prayers in silence. But his heart still beat. A call across time. It was this heartbeat, this faint echo of life, that the warp had carried. It was his memory, his broken prayer that had drifted into the immaterium and twisted into a transmission. When the Black Templars would later intercept it, they would not hear words. They would feel it. A sense of desperation, a demand for vengeance, a plea for recognition. The bastion was not abandoned. It was waiting. Closing of Scene 2, the Citadel Invictus stood as both ruin and shrine, a scar upon the memory of Dorn himself. Its walls whispered betrayal. Its chapel bore the relics of heresy. And in its heart, something still lived, waiting for the galaxy to remember it. The silence was not empty. It was expectant. The void was not silent, not truly. To mortal ears, space was emptiness. But to the ears of an Astartes aboard a warship, the void hummed with machine spirits, the endless thrum of plasma drives, the basso murmur of reactor cores. Upon the battle barge Oath of Iron, the Black Templars drifted through the edge of a forgotten sector. Their banners hung heavy within the stratium, the air thick with incense and the tang of oil. Chaplains intoned prayers over the Vox arrays, their Crozius Arcanum raised high to sanctify the machine spirits. And then it came. A whisper, not a signal in the traditional sense, not one of Imperial code ciphers or sanctioned channels. No, this was older, raw, broken, fragmented. At first, the machine spirits refused it, casting it aside as corrupted. But persistence is the tool of the warp, and the message forced its way into the Voxnet, dragging static and blood raw, shrieking with it. She-El, Dorn Emperor, Faith. The words twisted, shifting, repeating. Chains, silence, remember us, though. Marshal Adreston Vynar stood tall within the stratagem, his black armor trimmed with purity seals, his sword hanging at his side like a promise. Around him, the commanders of the crusade turned, their helm lenses narrowing as the distortion echoed across the chamber. What is this corruption? Hissed Castellan Morchant, his gauntlets tightening on the edge of the hololith table. A tech marine, crimson-helmed and cloaked in incense smoke, leaned over a rune console. His mechadendrites flickered as he adjusted the auger relays. It is ancient, an echo. The signal defies machine logic. It comes and fades, yet it does not die. The warp carries it. Adreston's helm remained locked upon the flickering Vox wave as the fragments repeated again. Shield! Dorn, chains. The marshal's voice rumbled like a storm. Dorn. At that single name, silence swept the chamber. For to the Black Templars, progeny of Rogel Dorn, that word was more than a mere signal. It was an oath, a chain, a fire that burned hotter than the void itself. The debate of faith chaplains gathered, their Crozius staves glinting in the lumen light. It could be a trick, growled Chaplain Sarath. The archenemy knows the names that stir our blood. To hear Dorn's name in such corruption, it reeks of heresy. Yet, what if it is true? Countered Castellan Morchant, his voice sharp with zeal. What if a chapter cries out across the void? What if one of Dorn's blood yet endures, calling for vengeance? The debate roared. Some urged caution. The signal was tainted, warped. Others urged fury. No name but Dorn's could compel such urgency. Marshal Adreston let the words wash over him. His gaze never left the flickering Vox wave, its static echoing like the heartbeat of a dying god. And then slowly he raised his hand. The chamber fell silent. We are the Black Templars. Adreston spoke, his voice steady as iron. We do not ignore the cries of brothers. If this is heresy, we shall burn it. If it is loyalty, we shall answer it. Either way, his gauntlet clenched into a fist. We shall bring the Emperor's truth. The machine spirit's refusal still, the message resisted understand. The tech marine bowed his head in frustration, sparks flickering from his mechadendrites. A marshal, the machine spirits reject this signal. They will not translate it fully. They deem it blasphemy. Adrestan turned his helm toward the chaplains. Then sanctify it. A circle was formed around the Vox relay. Incense burned black. Crozius staves struck the deck, each blow ringing like a bell of war. Prayers were intoned, not merely to the Emperor but to the Primarch Dorn himself, asking him to guide his sons through the darkness. The Vox crackled, resisted, shrieked, and then shifted. We are bound in chains of faith. Dorn's shield is ours. The Emperor is silent. Remember us? A hiss rippled across the Stratium. Some clenched their fists in fury. Others bowed their heads in grief. The words bore the stench of heresy, yet also the weight of despair. Adrestan's vision that night, Marshal Adrestan prayed within the Reclusium, kneeling before a statue of Dorn carved from ivory. His sword lay across his knees, its edge catching the glow of votive flames. And in that silence, the warp brushed his mind. He saw visions, not clear, not ordered, but fragments. A fortress shrouded in ash, warriors in black and gold, half bowed in prayer, half drenched in blood. A shield, vast and broken, glowing with unnatural light. And above it all, the sound of chains rattling, not of iron, but of faith. Adrestan's eyes opened. His decision was made. The oath of the crusade upon the deck of the Oath of Iron, Adrestan summoned his warriors. Hundreds of Black Templars gathered in the Grand Muster Hall, their black ceramites shining beneath sacred banners. The air thrummed with chants. The marshal raised his sword. Brothers! Voices cried out from the dark, bearing the name of Dorn. It comes to us broken, corrupted, but true in its desperation. I say this. We shall answer it. We shall not let the memory of Dorn's sons be chained by silence. If they are loyal, we shall free them. If they are traitors, he drove the sword into the deck, sparks leaping from the metal. We shall deliver the Emperor's wrath. The chamber shook with the cry of 100 voices. On no pity, no remorse, no fear. Setting the course, the fleet turned its prow toward the dead sector. Navigators whispered, their third eyes bleeding at the strain of peering into that cursed void. The warp snarled as if resisting them, shadows pressing against the Geller fields. But the Black Templars did not falter, for to ignore such a call would be cowardice. And cowardice was death. Closing of Scene 3, the broken transmission had found its audience. The fortress that lingered in silence now had hunters coming for it. Not merely to save, but to judge. In the blackness of space, the words repeated still. Chains, faith, Dorn, and the crusade thundered into the dark. A battle barge does not leave port as a mere ship. It departs as a cathedral of war. The Oath of Iron hung in high anchor above the barren forge moon of Xandros, its hull gleaming with fresh anointing oils. Servitors crawled across its armored hide, polishing sigils of purity. Cherubim, with vox grills in place of mouths, circled its towers, singing vox-distorted hymns. Within its cavernous halls, the warriors of the Black Templars gathered. Before any fleet could sail into the warp, ritual demanded that oaths be spoken, sanctity renewed, and the eyes of both Emperor and Primarch fixed upon the journey. Marshal Adrestan stood upon a raised dais, flanked by chaplains and sword brethren. His armor was freshly blessed, its surface etched with scripture in high Gothic. The hall below him seethed with black-armored forms, each Templar kneeling, their heads bowed. The air was heavy with incense and the roar of organ pipes. Adrastan's words, brothers of Dorn, Adrestan thundered, his voice carrying across the mustering hall, amplified by vox grills, yet infused with the raw force of a commander's will. I cry has reached us, not of mortals, but of Astartes. They call themselves sons of Dorn, yet their words are tainted. They speak of chains, of silence, of a shield that is not his. Some call this a trap. Some call it heresy. I call it our duty. His gauntlet rose, pointing to the towering statue of Rogal Dorn carved into the hall's rear wall. The Primarch's stony gaze looked down, eternal and yielding. Dorn did not falter when Terra burned. Dorn did not break when traitors clawed at the walls of the Emperor's palace. He stood, he bled, he endured. And now, in this age of rifts and shadows, his son shall not ignore those who claim his name. He drew his sword, its edge flaring in the light. If they are true, we shall stand beside them. If they are false, we shall cut them down. Either way, their silence ends. A roar erupted from the kneeling host. No pity, no remorse, no fear. The binding of oaths one by one, the chaplains moved among the kneeling Templars, pressing their crozius against each warrior's pauldron. Oaths were whispered in unison, prayers of loyalty, vengeance, and wrath. Each brother vowed not merely to fight, but to cleanse, not merely to endure, but to burn away corruption wherever it hid. Some carved new scripture into their armor with ritual knives, cutting deep enough that blood joined the etchings. Others bound chains around their gauntlets, a symbol of their self-imposed slavery to duty. When it came time for Adristan himself, he bowed his head before the statue of Dorn. A chaplain approached, but the marshal lifted his own blade and cut across his palm. Blood welled bright against black gauntlet. He pressed his hand against Dorn's stone foot. "We will endure." At that moment, the fleet tore free of the Imperium and emerged upon the edge of the forgotten system. Closing of scene 4, the oath was spoken. The fleet had sailed. And now across the Gulf of Dead Stars, the black silhouette of Citadel Invictus awaited them, its towers jutting like broken teeth against the void. The silence was over. The judgment was about to begin. The fleet hung at the edge of the system, silent and watchful. Citadel Invictus loomed before them, a fortress monastery carved into a dead world's mountains. Its towers stretched like broken spears, its walls pitted with ancient bombardment scars. Where once golden shields had shone, now only blackened stone remained. Ash clouds clung to the planet's surface, swirling endlessly as if the very air were poisoned by memory. The Citadel's great Vox towers, once beacons to guide fleets of the Imperium, now jutted crooked and silent, their spires cracked, their surfaces scrawled with heretical scripture visible even from orbit. Yet amid this ruin, the fortress still lived. Lumen fires burned faintly in its towers. Contemplacements turned like watchful eyes. And across the Vox, the broken transmission whispered still, louder now, stronger. Chains, faith, Dorn. The Templars react on the bridge of the Oath of Iron. The stratagem flickered with augur images. The defenses are active, intoned the Tech Marine. Batteries powered, void shields fluctuating but intact. Machine spirits resist communion. They recognize us, but their code is twisted. Castellan Merchant bared his teeth in a snarl. Are they daring their guns at us? At Sons of Dorn? Chaplain Serath shook his head. No, this is no mere defiance. This is possession. Something here lingers between loyalty and damnation. Adristan's gaze never left the ruined citadel, his voice iron. They will answer to us. Prepare the boarding prayers. The descent drop pods hung in their racks, great iron coffins bristling with purity seals. Servitors swung censers, filling the launch bay with smoke. Chaplains moved among the warriors, pressing crozius against helms, chanting benedictions. Each Templar fastened chains around his gauntlets, symbol of their unbreakable duty. They intoned oaths together, their voices shaking the walls. By Dorn's blood, by the Emperor's throne, by steel and fire we shall cleanse. Adristan himself entered a pod with his sword brethren. His armor gleamed with fresh blood scripture. In one hand he bore his blade, in the other a reliquary fragment of Dorn's armor, a piece he had sworn would be the first relic shown to the Invictors, should they prove loyal. Fire from the ash as the pods launched, fire answered. Defense turrets awoke with roaring fury. Batteries older than the Great Rift spat flame across the void. Macro cannon shells the size of drop pods screamed upward, tearing into the void with catastrophic force. One strike cruiser's shields flared and collapsed. A glancing hit tore through its flank, venting entire decks into the abyss. Yet still the crusade pressed on, their drops thundering through storms of fire. Adrastan's pod slammed into the ash wastes outside the fortress walls. The impact split stone, ash clouds billowing like blood in water. Bolter fire greeted them instantly, disciplined, precise, as if fired by Astarte's hands. The first battle, the hatches blew open. Templars surged out into the storm, bolters barking, chain swords snarling. Their voices rose in war cry, no pity, no remorse, no fear. The defenders were indeed Astartes. Their armor was black and gold, the heraldry of the Invictors, though battered and scarred by centuries of war. Some bore chains wrapped around their pauldrons like relics. Others had scripture painted in their own blood across their helms. They fought with the fury of true space marines, but their cries were twisted. For Dorn's shield, they roared, yield and perhaps some fragment of your soul can be saved. Kalo's voice boomed in return, resonant and commanding. Accept the chains and you will understand. You will see as we see. You will fight not for a dying emperor, but for Dorn eternal. The Invictors' chant rose louder, thunderous, shaking the walls. Chains! Defiance! Adraston's vision blurred. Pain seared through him, but his faith burned hotter. He thought of Dorn, of the Emperor's golden throne, of Terra itself standing eternal against the void. His voice rasped, raw but unyielding. I kneel to no one but him on Terra. With a roar, he tore his blade free, severing the chains that bound him. Energy screamed as links shattered into sparks. He surged upward, driving his blade into Kalo's shield, cracking its surface at last. Kalos staggered, his chant faltering. The Templars, seeing their master rise, redoubled their fury, driving the Invictors back step by bloody step. Closing of Scene 6, the chapel burned, the air choked with smoke and blood. Kalos retreated deeper into the fortress, his shield fractured but not broken, his voice echoing through the halls. You will see, Adraston, you cannot kill chains, for they bind all things. The Invictors fell back with him, their chants fading into the depths of the citadel. The Templars stood bloodied but unbroken, the corpses of corrupted kin scattered across the sacred floor. Adraston planted his sword into the stone, breathing heavily, his helm cracked and scarred. He spoke to his brethren, voice grim. This fortress is not merely corrupted, it is damned. And its damnation is our duty to end. The crusade roared their ascent, and the hunt for Kalos began. The fires of the chapel still burned behind them, casting the upper halls in an orange glow, but ahead stretched only darkness. The Templars marched with blades wet with blood, their armor scarred by chains and claws. Adraston Vanar led them without hesitation, his helm cracked but his eyes burning with relentless will. His sword still thrummed faintly with righteous energy, every oath inscribed upon it resonating with the prayers he whispered beneath his breath. A down Adraston commanded. His gauntlet pointed to the yawning stairwells at the far end of the chapel, where stone steps spiraled into the bowels of the fortress. Kalos retreats not to flee, but to draw us deeper. He has not yet revealed his true altar. The chaplain beside him, grim-faced, tapped his Crozius against the stone. Then we will drag him into the Emperor's light and burn whatever filth he hides. The Black Templars answered with their creed, no pity, no remorse, no fear. The bones of the fortress, the descent took them through layers of ruin. The first levels were barracks, long abandoned. Bunk frames stood empty, scripture peeling from the walls. In some chambers, corpses sat upright at tables, their skeletal hands still clutching rosaries of chain. Deeper still, the fortress changed. The walls grew rough, no longer shaped by human hands, but carved crudely, as though forced open by claws. The air thickened, metallic and damp. Their boots crunched on bones, so many that the stone beneath was almost hidden. Symbols were carved everywhere, chains etched into walls, shields cracked and inverted, the sigil of Dorn twisted into a prison of links. The Templars moved in silence, bolters raised, their footsteps echoing in rhythm like a funeral march. The whispering dark as they entered the crypts proper, a pressure settled upon them. Oh, not physical, but spiritual, a weight in the air pressing upon their faith. Whispers rose from the wall. They did not come from mouths, but from the stone itself, as though the fortress remembered every betrayal and screamed it back into their ears. The Emperor abandoned you. Adorn changed you long ago. Your faith is weakness. Some of the younger brethren faltered for half a step, but Adraston's voice cut through the dark like a blade. Steel your hearts, brothers. These are not truths. They are lies spoken by cowards in chains. The chant of the Templars rose once more, drowning out the whispers with thunder. Emperor, guide us. Dorn, guard us. Faith, arm us. The chamber of chains. At last, the crypts opened into a vast subterranean hall. Pillars of black stone rose to a ceiling lost in shadow. Chains hung everywhere, from rafters, from pillars, from broken statues. They swayed, though no wind moved them, clinking like distant bells. And there, at the center, stood Kalos once more, but now he was changed. His shield, fractured in their duel above, was reforged with living chains, its surface writhing. His armor bore fresh inscriptions carved into the ceramite, bleeding as though the words themselves were wounds. His helm was gone, and his face was pale, eyes glowing like embers. Behind him stood the remnants of the Invictors, fewer now, their bodies torn from the chapel battle, but each one chained to the others, their forms linked like a single monstrous phalanx. Kalos spread his arms. Welcome to the true heart of Invictus. Here lies the oath Dorn never swore, the oath we swore for him. Look upon the chains, eternal, forged in pain, sealed in blood. This is what binds all warriors. This is the creed of survival. The living altar, the floor beneath Kalos cracked open, revealing a pit lined with chains that pulsed like veins. From within came a faint heartbeat, colossal, steady, unnatural. At its center, bound in layers of iron links and holy seals corrupted into mockery, lay a colossal figure, a space marine entombed yet alive. His armor was shattered, his skin pale, his body pierced by chains driven deep into flesh and bone. His eyes were closed, his lips whispering broken prayers. The chaplain gasped. Lycomeris? No, a chapter master. Kalos bowed his head toward the chained figure. Our first master, the last true son of Dorn to walk these halls. He did not abandon us. He gave himself to the chains eternal, so that we would never forget our duty. His heartbeat is the pulse you heard across the stars. His pain is our faith. The Invictors struck their chains in unison, the sound like thunder. Thunder, the choice Adrestan stepped forward, fury shaking his frame. You defile your master's sacrifice. You bind him like a beast and call it faith. This is heresy beyond redemption, Kalos. For this, every stone of this fortress will burn. Kalos' laughter echoed like a dirge. You do not understand, Adrestan Vaynar. Pain is purity. Chains are truth. He suffers so we may endure. Will you strike him down, Templar? Will you cut the last heartbeat of Invictus? Or will you see that his sacrifice makes him greater than any corpse upon a throne of gold? The hall fell silent, both sides waiting for Adrestan's answer. The first strike, Adrestan did not falter. He raised his sword, its inscriptions blazing bright with every oath he had ever sworn. I will not let his sacrifice be mocked by your lies. By his will, I will free him. And with that, the Templars charged. The crypt became a furnace of battle. Chains lashed from the walls like serpents, ensnaring limbs and tearing armor. The Invictors moved as one, linked by their bonds, fighting not as individuals, but as a living wall of blades and shields. The Templars smashed against them, fury against fanaticism, their war cries rising like storm winds. At the center, Adrestan and Kalos met once more, their duel resuming, their blades carving sparks into the stone. Above them, the chain chapter master stirred, his lips moving faster, his whispers growing into groans of agony as battle raged in his shadow. Closing of Scene 7, the crypt shook with the fury of war. Chains rattled, stone cracked, blood spilled upon ancient floors. Adrestan knew the truth. This battle was not simply for victory. It was for the soul of Invictus itself. If Kalos triumphed, the chains eternal would spread, a creed of bondage in Dorn's name. If Adrestan triumphed, the fortress would burn, and with it, the Invictors' heresy. At the heart of it all, the chain chapter master's heartbeat thundered louder, echoing through stone and soul alike. The outcome was yet undecided. The crypt was alive, the chained figure at its heart. The first chapter master of the Invictors stirred in his bonds. His body was broken, his face hollowed, his flesh pale and stretched thin over bone. Yet his heartbeat thundered louder with each clash of blade and shield. Every strike, every cry of fury seemed to feed him. Chains rattled and tightened, glowing with a sickly red light. The pit itself pulsed like a vein, blood mist rising in thick clouds. Adrestan felt it in his chest, a rhythm that did not belong to him. Thump, thump, thump. It threatened to replace his own heart, to synchronize him with the chained monstrosity. He snarled and forced it back with raw faith, slamming an oath into his mind like a fortress wall. My heart beats only for him on Terra. Agilos revelation, Kalos fought like a storm, his shield alive with chains that lashed outward, binding weapons, snapping blades, dragging warriors into the pit. You see it now, Adrestan. Kalos roared, his voice echoing through the crypt like a sermon. The heartbeat that called you here is not a trap. It is a gift. The Emperor is silent, but Dorn still speaks. His silence is filled by this. He slammed his shield into the ground. The chains writhed outward, binding corpses and dragging them into the pit. The chained master groaned louder, the sound like thunder in a cavern. This heartbeat will echo across the Imperium. It will call the forgotten, the abandoned, the broken, and they will come. They will forge the chains eternal, and the galaxy will remember the pain of survival. The battle within the Templars pressed hard, cutting down Invictors even as chains tore at their armor. Bolters thundered, cracked grenades detonated, chainswords howled. But for every Invictor slain, 2 more seemed to rise, dragged up from the pit by living lynx. Their faces were twisted, their armor blackened, their eyes empty but burning with fanatic zeal. Adristan cut down 3 in a single swing, his sword glowing so bright it seared through chains like paper. But still, the rhythm pressed into his soul. The chaplain fought at his side, his Crozius crackling with holy light as he smashed through Invictor's shields. Do not falter, brothers. The warp itself claws at us, but we are the Emperor's fury. We are the hammer of fate. The Templars roared their creed, but their voices were nearly drowned by the heartbeat. The awakening, the chained master's eyes opened. They were not human anymore. Golden once, like any son of Dorn, they now burned with molten crimson. His lips parted and words spilled out like oil upon water. I suffer, and through my suffering, they are strong. The chains binding him shuddered, glowing brighter. They were not merely prison, they were conduit. His agony fed the Invictors, filled their bodies with strength, their voices with madness. Kalos lifted his shield high, his face radiant with fanatical joy. Behold, he is not a prisoner. He is the foundation. He is the stone upon which the chains eternal are built. The Invictors' chant thundered. Chains, chains! The dual renewed Adristan lunged, his blade searing with light, striking Kalos with righteous fury. Their clash shook the crypt. Kalos' shield screamed as the sword tore new cracks into it, sparks flying. Chains lashed Adrastan's limbs, but he tore through them with raw strength, every oath inscribed into his blade burning like fire. You are blind. Adrastan roared, he is no foundation, he is enslaved. You worship torment and call it truth. Kalos pressed forward, his shield battering Adristan backward, each strike like a falling star. And you worship silence, a throne of dust and a corpse that cannot answer you. My faith is pain, and pain never lies. The breaking point, the crypt trembled, chunks of stone falling from the ceiling. The chain master writhed, his voice shaking the walls. Free me, or join me. The words slammed into Adrastan's skull like hammers. For a heartbeat, doubt flickered in him, not doubt of his emperor, but of his strength. Could he kill this figure, once noble, once faithful, now enslaved? Was mercy even possible? The chaplain's voice cut through, raw and furious. Oh, do not listen. Adristan, he is a corpse bound in iron. His voice is not his own. It is the warp's trickery. Strike him down and free him from this blasphemy. Adrastan roared his assent, raising his sword high. The counter, but Kalos moved faster. Chains erupted from his shield, wrapping Adrastan's blade mid-swing, halting it inches from the chain master's chest. Kalos slammed his shoulder forward, sending Adrastan sprawling across the stone. Kalos raised his shield like a banner, his voice thundering. You cannot destroy chains, Adrastan. Ovi, you can only embrace them. The Invictors surged, pressing the Templars to the brink, driving them toward the pit. The flame of faith as Adristan struggled to rise, blood in his mouth. He saw one of his brothers fall, dragged screaming into the pit by living lynx. His death fuels me. His faith binds me. I am pain eternal. I am the creed of chains. The crypt shook as if the planet itself trembled. Adristan realized the truth. The shield had not been the end. It had been a seal. And with its destruction, the Chainmaster's full power was now unleashed. Closing of Scene 9, the Templars braced themselves as the Chained Master rose higher, his bonds cracking, his heartbeat now a war drum that shook the very marrow of their bones. Adrastan stood bloodied but unbroken, his blade still blazing. He turned to his warriors, his voice iron, iron. This battle is not over. Kalos is dead, but his master still breathes, and we will free him the only way left, through fire and the Emperor's judgment. The Templars roared their creed, raising their blades as the chained giant stirred in the pit, his voice shaking the halls, chains eternal. Chains eternal. The final confrontation was about to begin. The pit cracked open like a wound in the world. From it rose the chained master, no longer a whisper in darkness, but a titan of pain and defiance. His body was a grotesque cathedral of agony, a Primaris frame swollen with muscle and scars, every inch wrapped in rusted iron chains that dug deep into his flesh. Blood streamed from his wounds, yet each drop sizzled into smoke as it touched the air, feeding the chains themselves. Eyes burned like coals in his gaunt face. His mouth opened in a roar that shattered stone, and with it every chain in the chamber writhed to life, snapping at the Templars like steel vipers. Adrestan planted his boots in the rubble, his blade held before him, blazing with the Emperor's fury. His men, bloodied and half-broken, formed a line behind him. Not one faltered. The chained master's voice shook the crypt like thunder. "You would free me with death? You would silence my creed? Fool! I am the creed. Chains bind all warriors to duty, to pain, to endless struggle. I suffer so that others will kneel." Adrestan's defiance, Adrestan spat blood and raised his sword, light cutting through the shadows. His voice carried above the roar of chains. "No, monster. You suffer because you chose chains over faith. We kneel to no prison, no silence, no false creed. We kneel only to him on Terra, and for him I will cut your bonds." His warriors roared with him, their voices a wall of defiance. No pity, no remorse, no fear. The final battle, the chain master surged forward. His chains lashed like whips, shattering stone and steel, tearing Templars from their feet. Adrastan charged to meet him, his blade flashing arcs of fire. Steel clashed with chain in a storm of sparks. Every swing of Adrastan's blade severed links, molten fragments, raining like meteors. Every strike of the chain master's fist cracked armor, sent warriors flying like broken dolls. The Templars fought like lions at their lord's side, hacking at the chains, their cries echoing with unyielding faith. But still the chains reformed, knitting themselves with the master's blood. Adrestan pressed forward, blow after blow hammering against the heretic's body, his blade carved into flesh, cutting deep wounds that bled fire and smoke. Yet the master did not falter. He only roared louder, his pain feeding his strength. The price of faith, the battle became slaughter. Templars fell, crushed, ripped apart, dragged screaming into the pit. Yet, for every brother lost, Adrestan struck harder. His body was breaking, bones cracked, blood pouring from his wounds, but his faith blazed like a sun. The chained master wrapped Adrestan in his bonds, lifting him high. The chains dug into his armor, crushing ribs, choking the breath from his lungs. The heretic's voice was a whisper in his ear, cold and venomous. "So you could join me. You could endure forever. You could be the creed." Adrestan's answer was a ragged roar at Em. The Emperor's creed. With the last of his strength, he drove his sword downward, piercing his own body where the chains coiled, letting his blood run over the blade.